Welcome to Unveiling Death. I am Rabbi Jeffrey Weil. Steady guide, calming presence with Rabbi Charles A. Kroloff. Friends, this is a very special episode for me. I have known Rabbi Kroloff since my family moved to Westfield, New Jersey in 1968. I was 3 years old. He taught me through my childhood and my teenage years. He was even one of my professors in rabbinical school. You say rabbi, I picture Rabbi Kroloff, so this is a great honor. And so Rabbi Charles A. Kroloff, he served Temple Emanu-El in Westfield, New Jersey for 36 years. He is a past president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, the largest rabbinic organization in the world, and has served as vice president for special projects of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. Rabbi Kroloff has authored several books, including Open Up Our Eyes, Moments That Shape Our Lives, Reform Judaism, A Jewish Way of Life, and When Elijah Knocks, A Religious Response to Homelessness. Rabbi Kroloff continues to write, teach, and swim. He and his wife, Dr. Terry Kroloff, have been married for 70 years. Here's my conversation with Rabbi Charles Kroloff. Rabbi Kroloff, welcome. And thank you so much for being a guest on Unveiling Death.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm pleased to be with you today.
It's a great honor for me. So I've known you since the beginning of my knowing, basically. And so this is a special honor to be talking to you on my podcast. And you also turned 90 in June.
That's right.
I'd like to explore the issue of mortality, late life, death rituals within the Jewish community or tradition with you. So I'll just start like this. When you, as you have many, many times, receive a call or get a message that someone within your congregation, you served Temple Emanu-El of Westfield, New Jersey for decades, that someone has died and you're speaking to a family member, what do you say first, typically? What have you learned not to say?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that I have evolved in my response. And it came to a point where what I try to say is, I am here for you. I'm here for you. I hear you. I am listening to you. Tell me what I can do for you at this time. That's really where I have evolved to. I think I started out as a young rabbi just wanting to say the right thing, not upset anyone, and to stay calm myself. Yeah, I really, whether I'm in person or on the phone, I want to hold their hand. I want to be there for them.
What was different about when you were a new rabbi? What were you doing that you evolved out of, do you think?
I think I probably, as a very young rabbi, wanted to make a good impression. I was perhaps a little overly concerned with myself and wanting to stay calm myself. And then eventually, with experience and time, I need to be the calming presence, the unanxious presence.
Right. The steady one in that situation.
Steady as you go, as much as you can, depending upon the situation. But I'm a human being, and I can't close down all my emotions on the arrival of a telephone call. So that's a balance that we rabbis deal with, to be there emotionally, but to be steady so that we are not overcome by emotion.
That issue of compartmentalization, I'm amazed for myself at how effective, unconsciously I am at that.
That's good to hear. I have found over the years that I got better at it. But I am a person whose emotions are fairly close to the surface, and I can be overwhelmed myself. Incidentally, not just as an aside, this is not necessarily in a death or funeral situation, but just if time is not urgent, I will sometimes give myself the opportunity to pull myself together. I think, even delay the conversation, if it's practical, usually is not, to actually get back to a person 5 minutes later if I find that I need to pull myself together. Now that's very rare, but I'm aware of my vulnerability.
Walk us through, if you would, the pre-funeral discussion you meet with the family, loved ones, and how that has changed for you, the questions you ask, the time you spend, and so forth over the years.
Right. I think in the beginning, I wanted to get my job done. The conversation quickly turned to how many children, grandchildren, background, what the individual had done with his or her life. But there too, I wanted to be present for the family and let the conversation evolve. Early on, I had structure for it. And as I moved on in my career, I became a better listener and wasn't asking as many questions because I saw that eventually the important information would come out anyhow. Well, maybe not as quickly as I had planned, but that's okay. I want to share with you an experience that I had many years ago. The death of a member of the congregation, and I met with the family. It was a large family. I won't go into any specifics because I needed to remain anonymous. But it was a large family, and we sat in a circle. That's important, how we're sitting. We sat in a circle, and what unfolded was a whole range of family dynamics and a lot of things that the children and spouse needed to say that they had not been able to say, not to me, but to each other. And it really became a kind of family therapy for about an hour and a half just after the time of death. I was so struck by that experience, far more revealing and important than almost any conversation pre-funeral that I had ever had. So it's not just an opportunity to plan the funeral, which is important, and to obtain information, but it's the interaction of the family members. So it's quite an opportunity. And that conversation often can run an hour, as you know. This particular one I'm referring to was an hour and a half to 2 hours. So that's an important conversation, and it's very therapeutic for the family and helpful to me as the officiant of the funeral.
Right, for sure. I mean, there have been times when conversations are going that direction. Interestingly, there are times when I will learn towards the end of, let's say, the hour of our time together, and they'll say, oh yeah, and there's another child that we haven't mentioned of the deceased. And I'll be like, wow, so that requires some conversation. And it wouldn't necessarily be for the sake of the eulogy, because the reason they withheld that information was because they did not want that in the eulogy. But it still needed to be discussed, if they're open to it. And I assure them, even early on, I say not everything that transpires in the next period of time that we're talking together is for the eulogy. It's also just an opportunity to share.
That's so important. And it's essential for family to know that they need to be free to say whatever's on their mind. And not only will I use discretion in what I use in the eulogy or the service, but also they should feel free to tell me when they don't want anything mentioned.
Right. So you've had the meeting, and I assume that you're taking notes during the meeting, and then you go home or to your office or whatever it is, and at a certain point, you're going to sit down and craft a eulogy. Have you had a basic structure that you have adhered to? Also, has that evolved? Or are you just trying to start fresh each time?
I've had a basic structure, and yet I try to be fresh each time. Early on, my structure was to begin with a passage from Jewish tradition, from Torah, from Talmud, from Midrash, and that would set the tone. But that evolved and changed. And after a while, I began the funeral itself directly speaking to the family. I like to address the family when it's appropriate, particularly close to the deceased. I will say that I sit on the mourner's bench with you. I don't always say that because sometimes I didn't even know the person. But as I'm older and I was in the congregation, was the leader of the congregation for so many years, I often am sitting on the mourner's bench. I want to acknowledge that at the beginning, that I am there with you. And I address the family.
this is at the beginning of the service, like before the eulogy, just like you get that out very early on.
I want to create what I'm feeling, which is a sense of closeness with the family. When I walk into the synagogue and they're in the front row as we all come in together, I will often give the children, the spouse, a hug or at least a clasp on the hand to show my concern, my warmth for them. And it's authentic. It's not theatrics. It's authentic. It's felt. So it's a personal relationship that I want to not only establish, but acknowledge that this is what I am feeling. And I will a little later go to a passage from our tradition that may set the tone.
So I guess there's a balance that probably just happens intuitively, naturally, where you're expressing that emotion, that closeness, sort of defining yourself or including yourself on that mourner's bench in a sense, and yet also being that kind of steady presence, representing the tradition, guiding them, assuredly through this process, which requires a certain, not a lack of warmth, but I think a certain remove.
Yes, you called it, you referred to it earlier as compartmentalization, and that's true. If I'm overwhelmed with emotion, I cannot do my job. And if I'm cold as stone, I cannot do my job. It's that combination. And honestly, the closer I have been to the deceased, the more of my own emotion is going to be included here. When I was younger, I was a little afraid of doing that. I didn't want to lose control. I want to be effective. And you need to be cautious and responsible here. But I'm much more willing to risk that. I've been through it.
Yeah. Did that happen at a point or just sort of steadily evolved? Was there something that happened that loosened you up? And I'll just say a memory about you that I was at Temple Emanu-El with my wife, Julie, the high holidays of 2001, right after September 11th.
Right.
Yeah. And that was not a funeral, but that was a time of mourning. And I do recall, not surprisingly, a different kind of emotional aspect to your service leading on that very weighty season. Short days after, if I recall correctly, days after September 11th. So that's why I ask if something happened or if it just naturally evolved over the years.
I don't recall anything particularly happening, but over the years, I have had profoundly emotional, devastating things that I and the community have gone through. I was a very young rabbi when a 13-year-old boy in Boston was killed by the T that was train that ran out in front of our sanctuary, our synagogue. I had just done his bar mitzvah. That was 9/11, which you just referred to. Very, very powerful. Yeah. So, it's not an individual moment when I went from one to the other, but it was cumulative, an accumulation of profoundly difficult moments and tragedies where that happened. And then the other is that as part of my career, as you know, I trained to be a marital therapist. And in that training, I worked very hard with a supervisor in figuring out how much of myself to put forward either in a therapeutic relationship or in public relationship. And I started out as one who was very guarded in that. Over the years, my training and my rabbinic experience emerged into being more of a presence.
Right. Interesting. I also wonder if sometimes the generation of really men, of the generation that came up when you were ordained, there was there was a certain image, expectation of a rabbi, I guess particularly a reform rabbi, as you are, perhaps in the conservative world as well, that was more aloof. And then that changed as with renewal and this probably maybe the 70s, 80s. Does that track?
Oh, absolutely tracks. And I want to refer specifically to the role of women here. My female colleagues, our female colleagues, certainly it showed me that it's okay to take chances and it's okay to reveal some of your innermost feelings as you move forward with the appropriate professional discretion always. But I owe a great debt to women colleagues who began to emerge and take leadership in our beginning in the 80s and, well, actually in the 70s with a few, and the 80s, and continuing right to this present day.
Right, right. I have a sort of a broader question about Jewish tradition and death and mourning rituals. There are some aspects of it that I wonder if those traditions speak well or properly satisfy the moment, whether it's for whom we say Kaddish and for how long, the days of Shiva, for instance, or whatever it is. Jewish tradition has, there are two goals. One is to honor the mate, honor the dead person, and also to comfort the avilim, the mourners. So have you felt that the tradition, qua tradition, as we have received it from the sages, basically responds properly? Is there anything that you might have wished were different or that you have modified?
Great question. Well, first let me start that I am just amazed at how well Jewish tradition speaks to the needs of myself or my fellow Jews in the death and mourning process. So the period before funeral, the 7 days of Shiva, the month, the year. So helpful, such an excellent guide. Jewish tradition helps us to know how to act and what to do. Having said that, there are aspects of our tradition that I give the mourner lots of permission to modify as needed. I'm grateful. I'm a Reform liberal rabbi, as you are, and I have that freedom. I'm not bound by halakha. I'm guided by it, but I'm not bound by it. And an example of that would be, and you alluded to it, say if there's a death during a chag, a festival, particularly during Sukkot or during Pesach, which are festivals that last a week. And according to halakha, if there's a death at that time, the period of Shiva, the mourning period, does not begin until the festival ends. That is not helpful, especially if the death should come in the early days of the festival and family does not begin to mourn. And then you pick it up 5 days later. So if a family is traditional and wants to do that, I support them, of course. But often they're aware of it, or I inform them of how it works, and they modify that to meet their needs, and they want guidance for that. Absolutely. Sometimes today, I think 7 days of mourning are still very valuable and important. Some families decide to mourn for 3 days. I provide them with that support as needed, but I also remind them of the tradition.
Right. There's also the question of the length of the mourning period, particularly the Kaddish recitation during the mourning periods. If it's if it's a older person who died and their children will say Kaddish for the 11 months, and if it's, God forbid, a child who dies, it's only 30 days according to tradition, and nobody feels comfortable with that. I know there's a reasoning for that the recitation of Kaddish for the 11 months for a parent demonstrates that it was a good parent, and that their children reflect well on them and their journey, but it does not seem to work very often for families.
Correct. So there again, permission and support for modification is helpful. You might ask, what's my greatest concern at this time of death? My first concern is the survivors. I want them to be able to navigate this difficult time. Also want to provide honor, kavod, as we say, kavod hamet, honor for the deceased. But sitting before me or speaking to me by phone is the family who needs immediate support. So I want them to be able to do what is going to be helpful for them.
So you turned, as I mentioned earlier, you turned 90 a few months ago. So that's a significant birthday.
It certainly is.
Right? Has being a rabbi or just being immersed in our tradition throughout your life, has that helped you grow older Does it help understand one's mortality? In a way, I guess I'm asking in a way that you personally might not have learned or grown into had you not been a rabbi and so deeply immersed in Judaism.
And I think you know this well, that being a rabbi is a great privilege. We are welcomed into people's lives, particularly at pivotal times of joyful celebration or mournful loss. That's a privilege, and it happens again and again and again. This is what we do. This is our life. A day rarely goes by, right, where we are not asked to be part or need to be part of the life of a congregant or a fellow Jew, and sometimes non-Jews who reach out to us. So it's a privilege, it's a blessing, it's a responsibility. It may sound trite, but I don't mean it lightly at all. I have learned so much from my friends and congregants, and the longer I live, the more I have learned. Mm-hmm. I have seen such examples of courage in the light of physical and emotional difficulty and of loss. I've seen so much courage in terms of being part of community and social justice and standing up for what is right. I think most of them, I don't think I know most of the people that I deal with and have dealt with are extraordinary human beings. And when I say that they're created in the image of God and that I see that reflection of the divine people along the way, I mean it so sincerely. So the longer I've lived, the more I've appreciated the courage and strength. In the hospital bed, in the mourner's bench, or walking the streets of a city or town on behalf of people who are oppressed and persecuted. So it's that longevity has really given me an insight. Longevity and the work of the rabbi has given me an insight into human courage. And I'm very grateful for that. As far as longevity, as you know, I swim a lot, and I think my swimming over the last 50 or more years has maybe 60 years, as together with my faith and my community. The swimming has been physically very important. Community is important. Being part of a synagogue community and a larger community, this, as we know, helps. No guarantee, but it helps a lot.
Also, your continued learning, writing, teaching, which you do continue to do, would help.
I just finished the first of several sessions I'm going to teach on one of my favorite thinkers and writers, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. I loved preparing for it. I loved teaching it. I love Heschel. And that also keeps me a little younger than I might be otherwise.
Well, from strength to strength, Yesher Koach. And Chuck, Rabbi Kroloff, teacher and friend, I'm so grateful to have spoken to you for this episode of Unveiling Death. Thank you very much, Jeffrey. It's been a joy for me, too. And I wish you hatzlacha, much success with your podcasts and with everything that you do in your community as rabbi and leader. Thank you. Many thanks to Rabbi Charles Kroloff. Thanks to Unveiling Death's editor, Bethany Subang Milano. And thank you for listening to Unveiling Death, Eternity in about 24 minutes.